من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, please recite a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraj. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Hope everyone is doing well. Inshallah, I apologize for the delay that happened. We were discussing Khutbah of Hammam, or Khutbatul Muttaqin of Ali ibn Abi Talib, in which he discusses the different characteristics of those who are virtuous, those who are truly the people of taqwa. The true believers is the title that we gave to this topic. And Imam Ali, when he started out, he said, number one, these individuals, hum ahlul fada'il. They are the people who are virtuous. In other words, when you spend time with them, their character is intriguing for you. You want to spend time with them. You are naturally drawn to them. This was the first characteristic that he pointed out. Then he came to number two, and number two was mantiquhum as-sawab. They know how to speak. When they speak properly. Yes, they speak with the proper etiquette. They speak with the proper adab. They know the manners that they have to keep in mind. They don't say stuff that's going to create problems, and so on and so forth. And he didn't go into detail explaining what does it mean that they speak properly, but we wanted to go into detail to understand what is it that we have to keep in mind when we speak to one another. I mentioned this a number of weeks ago, and I'll mention it again. When we interact with one another, the real way we interact with one another is through our speech. That's how we interact with one another, yes? Our physical interaction, it used to be very little. Now it's almost zero with this COVID that's going on. So really when we interact with one another, it's the speech that we have. Therefore, if I speak well, I'm interacting well with others. If I don't speak well, then my interaction is going to be a negative interaction with others. So he said, mantiquhum as-sawab. They speak well. What does it mean for them to speak well? This is such an important topic, and it's such a critical topic. For those who remember, a couple Ramadans ago, we touched on this during the nights of Qadr, the etiquette of speech. And we talked about some of the things that we have to keep in mind in this regard. So we went through number one, the person who speaks too much. He wants to get one point across to you. It takes him half an hour to get that one point across to you, yes? And we talked about the issues we have of this and how Ali ibn Abi Talib, his khutbahs were never like this in reality. That was number one. Number two was the person who, whatever you shared with them, they would make the conversation about themselves. If you came to them with a difficulty that you're going with, immediately they'll bring up a bigger difficulty that they are dealing with. And you don't even have the opportunity to now share what you wanted to talk about. If you come to them with an achievement, they will speak of their own achievements, and their own achievement will probably be even bigger. And the discussion is not even about you anymore. We said when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we speak to Him, He cares enough to listen to us. He cares enough to respond to us. You remember that hadith that we shared, that when the servant of Allah, he recites Surah Al-Fatiha, every line that he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to the angels about His servant. He says, look, this is what he said. I'm going to do this for him. This is what he said. I'm going to do this for him. And he gives that attention in detail to what you and I are saying. And we are to do the same when it comes to the servants of God. That was number two. Number three was the one who is just too blunt. Because it's true, he's going to say it. He has no filter. We talked about this in detail. And we said how dangerous such an individual can be. And how Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, the brother of Ali ibn Abi Talib, when he went to Habasha, when he went to Ethiopia, and he was in that critical moment with the king of Ethiopia, he said the right things. And because he said the right things, he was able to save the lives of 70, 80, or some have even said up to 100 Muslims who had fled away from Quraysh. Even though what he had really believed in was not what this Christian king really believed in. We don't believe in the Trinity the way the Christians do, yes? We don't believe that Isa alayhi salam is human and God at the same time. We don't believe in any of these things. And these are fundamental to the Christian faith, at least in most denominations of the Christian faith, yes? But he didn't talk about those things because he knew what to say. Even though these things are true about us, he didn't touch on those things. He had the wisdom to choose exactly what he is supposed to say. Number 3, the one who just opens his mouth, says whatever is true. We're going to move on tonight to number 4. Number 4 is a person who, when you speak to him, out of every 5 sentences, 4 of them is negative. The moment you sit and you talk to this person, now you're leaving, you feel like the whole world has turned dark. Some people are like this. Anytime you sit with them, you say, yes, Maulana, forget about today. Back in the day, the old days were the good days. Now it's terrible. Now everything is bad. The economy is bad. People are bad. Everything is terrible. People don't respect anymore. People don't do this anymore. It's okay to have, complaints. It's okay to vent. That's fine. But being negative so much that the person who's sitting with you now feels like he's living in a dungeon. And this is a problem in our cultures, because in the cultures that most of us come from, we usually complain about things a little too much. Yes? We usually are the type of people who are constantly negative. Doesn't mean you have to always say everything is nice and dandy. No, you have to have a moderate perspective when it comes to life. There are negatives in life, there's no doubt about it. But becoming too negative, it drains the energy of the person that you are speaking to. This person speaks to you for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, it's like, you know what? Forget about it. It's like, I had all these hopes and dreams. Forget about it. Forget about all my hopes and dreams. It seems as though nothing works these days, yes? Being too negative is a problem. And this is something that in our hadith is mentioned in different ways. Amongst them, hadith tells us that we are supposed to do tafa'ul. And we've touched on this topic before, so I won't spend too much time on it. Tafa'ul means what? Tafa'ul means that you see things happening in your life and you take them as a glad tiding. Doesn't mean necessarily that something good is going to happen, but you have that positive mindset. Yes? You're looking to hit a certain goal. You took the first step. Say, Alhamdulillah, I took this first step. Inshallah, the other ones will come. Not the inshallah that we say, you say inshallah, you don't do anything. That's the inshallah that you and I say, right? That's not what we're talking about. The inshallah where I still do what I'm doing, yes, but I have that positive mindset. This is very powerful. Motivational speakers, many times they will tell you, if you project this positive energy out into the world, it will come back to you, all of this kind of stuff. How do they prove that this stuff is real? That's a separate discussion. Within Islam, we know it's real. Within Islam, we have a framework, because hadith tells us that if you do tafa'ul bil khair, if you have a positive mindset, the way you picture Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the way you assume He's going to be dealing with you, He will act with you in that way. If you say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the best in mind for me, then He will do the best for you. And hadith says, if you say, no, this God of mine, my life has always had problems, is going to have problems in the future as well. He says, okay, this is what you want. Right? Multiple ahadith speak about this. أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِيَ الْمُؤْمِنِ. I act and I deal with a believer the way he thinks about me. The way he assumes I'm going to be dealing with him. If he looks at me and he says, you know what, this Lord of mine is kind, He's forgiving, He's generous, He's going to choose the best for me, I'm going to choose the best for him. But if he has the audacity to bring me down to the level of another human being or an evil human being and look at me and say, he doesn't want the best for me. Terrible things have happened and terrible things will happen for me in the future. He says, if he looks at me in this way, then I will do the same thing that he thinks of me. It just depends on how he's going to assume that I'm going to be dealing with him. When someone speaks to us, we have to be careful not to get too negative. Yes, certain times someone comes to you, there's a particular issue you're venting about, you can, speak of the difficulties you're going through. But every person, everyone who comes and sits with you, walking away, their mental health is affected because you made the world look dark to them. This is not the way Islam taught us to be, yes? And you find with the Prophet, his approach was never this negative approach. It's always a positive approach. Even during times of difficulty, it was a positive approach. He acknowledged that people are going through difficulty. But he took that difficulty and he said, inshallah, in the future it gets better. Inshallah, in the future it's going to be better than what it is. Did he know that for sure? No, not necessarily. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides what's going to happen in the future. But this is what he would assume of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He's choosing the best for us. at all times. Number 4 of the etiquette of speech is to make sure that one is not negative when he is speaking to another person. These are some of the etiquette of speech. If I want to be able to abide by these, I want to be able to act upon these, what am I supposed to do? Number 1, speak a little less. Speak a little less. Many of us, when we get into our family gatherings, we sit with friends, then this thing starts going. And before you know it, you're gossiped, you've backbited about this person, you've been talking about the private life of another person, things that you're not allowed to share. You just keep going. Why? Because it just keeps coming. This is what shaitan loves, when he gets you into that mode of just talking. Yes, that's number 1. Speak a little less. The more you speak, the more you are prone to making these mistakes. Number 1. Number 2, think before you speak. And this is why the hadith of Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajam. He says, lisanul aqili wara'a qalbih. He says the tongue of an intelligent man lies behind his heart and behind his mind. Meaning that when something wants to come to his tongue, he wants to say something, it runs through the filter of his mind first. If you want to get to the tongue, you have to go through what? You have to go through his heart and his mind. He's going to filter it. He's going to think about it. And he says, وَقَلْبُ الْأَحْمَقِ وَرَاءَ لِسَانِهِ. But the ignorant person, his heart and his mind lies ahead of his tongue. What does that mean? It means anything that comes to his mind comes to his tongue. Doesn't think about it. How many times have you seen this? In a critical moment, someone says one sentence, the next 20 years this becomes a problem in the family. These are real situations, yes? Know when to say something and when not to say something. That only comes through thinking. I'll give you an example. Someone is very, very upset right now. And you know this person is the type of person, when he gets very frustrated, he might say things. He might do things that later on he will regret himself. Okay? Now, he's not justified in being angry and frustrated like this. He should be able to control himself. But for whatever reason, this is the type of person he is. Okay, before you say something, think about what it's going to lead to. Is this the moment to joke around with him? Is this the moment to say something to make him even more frustrated? God forbid he turns around, says something about someone's family, about someone's loved one, about someone's reputation and credit and so on and so forth. You have to be careful in these moments. And we're all tested with this. Muslim, non-Muslim, atheist, Jewish, Christian, doesn't matter. We're all tested with these things. Think before you speak. That's number 2. Moving on to number 3. Understanding that you and I are in the presence of those who are watching us. We have this concept of sometimes we're in public, sometimes we are in private. Islam says, listen, sometimes you're in a place that's very public, sometimes you're in a place that's just a little public. You're never in private. There is no such thing as private. Why? I was in the room. There was no one with you. There were 5 things that were with you in that room. 5, not 1. 1, if I told you to name 1, you would name God. I mean, that's the easiest one, right? You say, well, God is always with you. Yes, God is with you. That's number 1. The angels are with you. Your own angels. That's number 2. Yes. Number 3, that limb and that part of the body that you use to say what you're about to say, that's going to bear witness against you also. That's number 3. Number 4, the earth and the land on which you stand when you speak will bear witness to what you did. That's number 4. Number 5 is what? The imam of your time. He knows what you're doing. Yes, this is a means of shame for someone like myself. He knows what you're doing. And philosophically, there's a discussion. How is it that when I do something, the imam automatically knows? Many times we've heard that the imam knows maybe once a week he's told or twice a week he's told. The reality is he knows in real time what you're doing. Otherwise, he would not be given the title hujjah. Otherwise, he would not have this position where if he wasn't there, the whole earth would fall apart, as hadith says. Yes? This is why. Because everything runs through him. In those moments where you think these are private moments, you think no one else is there, no one else can hear what I'm saying, there's 5 different entities watching you in those moments. And when you're in public, then obviously you are in
public. Know that people are watching you. There are those who are watching you. And number 4, inshallah, before we move on to the next point, understand the significance of your speech. Understand the significance of what you say. The power of your words. Your words carry power. This is why the Quran says in the story of al-Ifk, this is mentioned in Surah An-Nur, where one of the Muslims was accused of being part of a relationship that was not lawful. Yes? And the Quran says, people used to speak about this false accusation. And people used to spread the message from one person to another. And the Quran says, إِذْ تَلَقَوْنَهُ بِأَلْسِنَتِكُمْ. Remember that time where you were receiving this information with your minds, and you were passing it on to the next person. You heard something, you pass it on to the next person. And then the Quran says, وَتَحْسَبُونَهُ هَيِّنًا. And you assume it's not a big deal. Why? Because I just said a couple sentences. I mean, I didn't kill this person. You might have done something worse. وَتَحْسَبُونَهُ هَيِّنًا. You consider it to be hayyin. Hayyin means light, not a big deal. وَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَظِيمٌ. But in the eyes of God, it was very big, what you said. That little comments that you made. Sometimes the way you look at somebody. Yes, of course, we are not to judge someone just based on the way they look at us. We're not to jump to conclusions, yes? But in certain situations, I'm looking at somebody, I look at them with a look of wrath, or I look at them with a look of humiliation. These are all the Quran says, وَتَحْسَبُونَهُ هَيِّنًا. You consider these things to be small things. وَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَظِيمٌ. But in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a big deal. It's not something small that you did. So understanding the power of your words. They have a saying in Farsi. They say that there are words that have taken the lives of human beings. There are words that have given life to human beings. That's the power that the words carry. مَنْطِقُهُمْ الصَّوَابِ. When they speak properly. This is the second characteristic that Ali ibn Abi Talib mentions. Moving on to number 3, inshallah. Number 3, and I'll just set the stage for this, and inshallah I'll wrap up for today. He says, number 3, these people of taqwa, these people who are the true believers, مَلْبَسُهُمْ الْإِقْتِصَادِ. Their clothing, the way they dress, is a very moderate way. It's not extreme. It's not extravagant in the sense that it's too shiny and too fancy. It's also not so terrible that people look at them and disrespect them maybe because of their clothing. No, they wear something that's presentable, but it's simple. It's a modest clothing. And when Ali ibn Abi Talib says their clothing, he means their lifestyle. It's not just your clothing. The way they come, the way they go. Yes? It's a moderate lifestyle that they live. And this is a huge problem for us living in this part of the world. Because when you live in this part of the world, you automatically are living in a small group of people around the world who are living more convenient lives than almost anyone else. Automatically, just the fact that you live here. Then if you make a certain type of income, you're in an even smaller group. And Quran and Hadith tells us, listen, just because you are bringing in this income, bringing in the income is good. Ali ibn Abi Talib used to produce wealth all the time. He was working very hard. He might have even been working harder than you and I. We say we work very hard, yes? I work 40 hours, I work this many hours, that many hours. Ali ibn Abi Talib was working very hard. Ahlul Bayt used to work very hard. People used to come and see them. They were surprised as how much they were sweating when they were working. Yes? Companions of the 6th Imam, companions of other Imams, they narrate this. I came to see Fulan Imam, this Imam or that Imam. He was working in the land and he was sweating profusely. Multiple narrations narrate this for us. And when we would tell him, he would say, no, it's work. You have to do it. Producing wealth is great, wonderful. But you and I have to be careful. This is what Ali ibn Abi Talib is saying. That just because your income goes up, your cost of living can't just keep going up with it. It's very interesting. When you're starting out, you say, Ya Allah, if I can just have this. If I can just have a car that runs well. Okay, wonderful. That's a legitimate need, yes? Then things move on, you get more settled. Alhamdulillah, that's wonderful. Then what happens? All of a sudden, the cost of living keeps going up. And I've had interactions with individuals who are making very good, alhamdulillah, they have wonderful income. At the end of their month, they're stuck. How is this? How is this? I was speaking to an individual, yes, in another city. This person was making north of, a certain number. Let's just say a lot more than, usually people make. Yes? And yet this couple were having issues. So how? So at the end of the month, we don't know where our money went. So all this money, where is it going? Our cost of living keeps going up, especially in the society that we live in. No, when your income goes up, Ali ibn Abi Talib is telling you, that's wonderful, that's great. مَلْبَسُهُمْ الْإِقْتِصَادِ. They are the type that even if they produce a lot of wealth, and we should, and the Muslim community does not do enough of that, and they do not plan enough for that, we should do more of that. But when it comes to spending it, then all of a sudden this person, no matter what his income is, at the end of the day, what happens? He's stuck. And what happens when he does that? Because he's stuck himself, he cannot fulfill his duties when it comes to Islam and his religion. He cannot fulfill his duties when it comes to his community. He cannot help those who are in severe need. Why? All this money is just going. This is not what Ali ibn Abi Talib is teaching us. He says, مَلْبَسُهُمْ الْإِقْتِصَادِ. They are moderate in their lifestyle. They produce a lot of wealth. Wonderful. That's great. They should do more. But just because all of this is coming in, you have to be careful that all of it doesn't just go out the other window. Otherwise, how did you settle down in your life? How did you settle down in your career? You're still struggling the way you were struggling the first year you had your job. A lot of it has to do with the lifestyle that we have in this country and this part of the world. Yes? Oh, this is what you're making. Okay, so you have to spend this. And you have to do this. And for the wedding, it has to be this much. And for a birthday, it has to be this much. Vacation, you have to go for vacation. You have to do this, and you have to fly to this place and fly to that place. And all of these are fine. But one has to live a moderate lifestyle. If he's producing a lot of wealth, wonderful. Do more. Yes? But he has to be careful that not all of it is just going to waste. He has to take care of his needs, and then there will be those who are in need of him. But if he's struggling himself at the end of each month, when this poor person comes to him and says, my child needs his help, for example, his own relatives at times comes to them and says, and he knows his relatives are in need, yes? With a stranger, maybe you have to verify all that kind of stuff. With your own relative, you can see this person is struggling with the basics. But because this person is struggling himself, now when it comes to those who are in need, what happens? He can't give. And I've seen this with my own eyes. This person is making a lot, but he can't give. Why? Because all of it is going out. And this is a problem. We'll, inshallah, leave our discussion here. Inshallah, next week we'll talk more about this moderate lifestyle, this lifestyle that is not extravagant and yet at the same time takes care of one's needs, yes, fulfills the needs that someone has, and creates a convenient lifestyle. But a convenient lifestyle and an extravagant one are two completely different things. Inshallah, with that, we'll bring tonight's talk to an end. Let's take a moment to recite Surah Al-Fatiha.